The Silent Hunters, a war submarine story. During a time of great conflict, many countries were at war. On the ocean, there were large battleships and fast fighter planes. But deep under the water, there were submarines. These submarines moved quietly, like hunters in the dark sea. One of these submarines was called the Silent Tiger, and it was known for its speed and stealth. The Silent Tiger was led by Captain John Anderson. He was an experienced sailor who had spent many years at sea. Captain Anderson loved the ocean, but he also knew how dangerous it could be during war. He had a strong crew with him, and they trusted him to keep them safe. The crew of the Silent Tiger came from different parts of the world. There was Mike, the strong and brave first officer. He had a loud voice and always had a funny joke to share. Then there was Sarah, the smartest of the crew, who was in charge of the submarine's radar. She could find enemy ships from miles away. Tom, the engineer, worked hard to keep the engines running smoothly. And finally, there was young Jimmy, who was only 19 years old. This was his first time on a submarine, and everything felt new and exciting to him. One early morning, Captain Anderson received an important message. An enemy fleet was moving closer to their homeland, and they needed to stop them before they reached the coast. The mission was clear. The Silent Tiger had to find the enemy's ships, stop them, and protect their people. Captain Anderson gathered his crew. "This mission will not be easy," he said, "but we must succeed. The enemy fleet is large, and they have many weapons. But we have something they don't, the power of surprise. We will move silently, like shadows in the water, and we will strike when they least expect it." The Silent Tiger dived deep into the cold ocean. The crew could feel the pressure as they went lower and lower. The water outside the submarine was dark, almost black. It was so quiet inside that the crew could hear their own hearts beating. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine. For hours, they sailed underwater, looking for any sign of the enemy. Sarah sat in front of the radar screen, her eyes sharp and focused. "Nothing yet," she said quietly. Captain Anderson stood next to her. He knew they had to be careful. One mistake could mean disaster. Submarines had to stay hidden if they were seen by the enemy. They could be attacked. The Silent Tiger was strong, but it couldn't survive a direct hit from a torpedo. Suddenly, Sarah's eyes widened. "Captain, I see something on the radar. It's far, but it's moving fast." The captain leaned over the screen. "That must be them," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Prepare the torpedoes." The crew moved quickly. Mike gave orders, and Tom checked the engines. Jimmy, though nervous, followed Mike's instructions carefully. This was the moment they had trained for. The captain leaned over the screen. "That must be them," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Prepare the torpedoes." The crew moved quickly. Mike gave orders, and Tom checked the engines. Jimmy, though nervous, followed Mike's instructions carefully. This was the moment they had trained for. As they moved closer, the enemy ships appeared on the radar, clearer and larger. There were 3 ships in total, and they were heavily armed. Captain Anderson had to decide how to attack. If they got too close, the enemy would detect them. If they stayed too far, their torpedoes might miss. "We'll go deeper," he decided. "We'll move under the enemy fleet, and when we're close enough, we'll fire." The submarine sank even lower into the sea. It was now so deep that the sunlight could no longer reach them. It was like being in a world without light. Jimmy felt a chill run down his spine. He had never been this deep before, and it made him feel small. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. It wasn't from the submarine. It was from the enemy ships above them. The enemy was sending out sonar waves, trying to find submarines, if the Silent Tiger was detected. The enemy would drop depth charges, explosive bombs designed to destroy submarines. "Hold your positions," Captain Anderson whispered. "Stay quiet." The crew held their breath. The submarine floated silently in the deep water, like a ghost. The enemy ships were right above them now. They could hear the rumbling of the engines and the clanking of metal as the ships moved through the water. It was a tense moment. Just when it seemed like the enemy was about to pass them, Sarah's voice broke the silence. "Captain, they're turning. They might have seen us." Captain Anderson's mind raced. He had to make a quick decision. "Fire the torpedoes now," he ordered, with a whoosh. The Silent Tiger launched its torpedoes. The crew watched on the radar as the torpedoes sped through the water, straight toward the enemy ships. There was a loud explosion. One of the enemy ships had been hit. The crew cheered, but Captain Anderson remained focused. "Dive deeper. They'll be after us now." The submarine began to dive again, moving as fast as it could. But the enemy was now aware of them. Depth charges were dropped into the water. Each explosion made the submarine shake violently. The crew held on tight as the Silent Tiger tried to escape. Would they survive? Could they outsmart the enemy and complete their mission? The Silent Tiger dove deeper into the dark ocean, trying to escape the enemy. The sound of depth charges exploding around them echoed through the walls of the submarine. The crew held on tightly as the entire vessel shook. Each explosion made them wonder if it would be their last. But Captain John Anderson remained calm. He knew that panic would lead to mistakes, and mistakes could cost them their lives. "Steady, everyone," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. "We've been through worse. We can survive this." Mike, the first officer, nodded at the captain and made sure the crew stayed focused. Sarah kept her eyes on the radar, tracking the enemy ships. Tom, the engineer, worked hard to keep the engines running smoothly despite the constant shaking. And young Jimmy, though scared, tried his best to stay calm. This was not just an adventure anymore. This was a fight for survival. The depth charges continued to fall around them, and with each explosion, the crew feared the worst. The Silent Tiger had been built to withstand pressure and attack, but there was only so much it could take. Suddenly, Sarah's voice broke the tense silence. "Captain, I see something on the radar." The depth charges continued to fall around them, and with each explosion, the crew feared the worst. The Silent Tiger had been built to withstand pressure and attack, but there was only so much it could take. Suddenly, Sarah's voice broke the tense silence. "Captain, I see something on the radar." "Another enemy ship is approaching from the east." Captain Anderson's face tightened. "They're trying to surround us." He realized, "We can't stay here much longer." The enemy was clever. They knew that if they kept the submarine trapped in one area, it would eventually be destroyed. Captain Anderson had to think fast. He looked at the map of the sea floor in front of him. There was a deep trench nearby, a place where the ocean floor dropped hundreds of meters. It was dangerous, but it might be their only chance to escape. "We're going into the trench," he said. "Tom, prepare the engines for a steep dive. Sarah, keep an eye on the radar. Let me know if the enemy follows us." The Silent Tiger began to dive again, heading for the deep trench. The pressure outside the submarine increased as they went lower. The walls of the submarine creaked, and the lights flickered for a moment. Jimmy swallowed hard, trying to stay brave. He had never been this deep before, and the darkness outside felt endless. As they approached the trench, Captain Anderson ordered the crew to cut the engines. The submarine drifted silently into the deep, black canyon below. It was a risky move. Without the engines running, they were completely vulnerable. But Captain Anderson hoped that the enemy wouldn't be able to find them in the darkness of the trench. The tension was unbearable. Sarah's eyes stayed glued to the screen, watching every tiny movement. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Then, suddenly, Sarah gasped. "They're moving away. Captain, I think they've lost us." The crew breathed a sigh of relief. The enemy ships were moving in the wrong direction, searching for the Silent Tiger in an area far from the trench. Captain Anderson allowed himself a small smile. The plan had worked. They had escaped. For now. "We're not safe yet," he reminded the crew. "We still have a mission to complete." The crew knew what he meant. Their mission wasn't just to survive. They had to stop the enemy fleet from reaching the coast. Captain Anderson had a decision to make. Should they stay hidden and wait for the enemy to leave, or should they strike again while the enemy was still confused? "We have to finish the job," Mike said quietly. "If we let them go, they'll come back stronger." Captain Anderson nodded. "You're right. We'll move in slowly and prepare for another attack. But this time, we'll need to be even more careful. They know we're out here. And they won't make the same mistake twice." The submarine slowly rose out of the trench, moving quietly through the water. The enemy ships were still far away, but they were on high alert. The Silent Tiger had to be invisible, not just on radar, but in every way. The crew reduced the noise from the engines to the lowest possible level. Every movement was made with caution. Sarah kept scanning the radar. "There's still one large ship out there," she said. "It's the command ship, the biggest one. If we take that down, the rest will scatter." Captain Anderson agreed. "That's our target." The command ship was heavily armed with powerful cannons and advanced technology. It would be a difficult target, but if they could destroy it, the enemy's plan would fall apart. The Silent Tiger crept closer, staying just out of range of the ship's sonar. The crew prepared the torpedoes. Mike gave instructions while Tom adjusted the submarine's position. Jimmy's hands shook as he helped load the torpedoes into the tubes. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. "Steady, steady," Captain Anderson whispered as they got closer. Finally, they were in position. The enemy ship was within range, and the torpedoes were ready to fire. Captain Anderson took a deep breath. "Fire!" The torpedoes shot out of the submarine and raced toward the enemy ship. The crew watched the radar as the torpedoes closed in on their target. Then there was a massive explosion. The command ship had been hit. Fire and smoke erupted from the side of the ship, and it began to sink. The crew of the Silent Tiger cheered. They had done it. The enemy fleet was in chaos, and without their command ship, they had no direction. But the celebration didn't last long. The enemy still had one more weapon: airplanes. As the command ship sank, it sent out a distress signal, and within minutes, enemy planes were flying overhead, dropping bombs into the sea. "Diving again!" Captain Anderson shouted. The submarine quickly descended into the deep water, trying to avoid the bombs. But this time, the enemy planes were more accurate. One bomb exploded close to the submarine, sending a shock wave through the vessel. "We've taken damage," Tom called out. "The engines are hit." The Silent Tiger began to slow down. They were now in serious trouble. Without full power, they couldn't outrun the enemy. The submarine started to take on water, and the crew rushed to fix the damage. Captain Anderson knew they had only one option left. "We have to surface," he said grimly. "We can't stay underwater with a damaged engine." "Prepare to fight on the surface." The crew was shocked. Surfacing meant they would be vulnerable to attack from the enemy planes. But they had no choice. The submarine slowly rose to the surface of the ocean, breaking through the waves. As soon as they surfaced, the enemy planes swooped down, firing bullets at the submarine. The crew grabbed their guns and began shooting back. It was a fierce battle, and the crew fought bravely to defend their ship. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a friendly fleet appeared on the horizon. Allied ships and planes came to their rescue, chasing the enemy planes away. The Silent Tiger was saved. Captain Anderson and his crew had completed their mission. The enemy fleet had been stopped, and their homeland was safe. but the cost had been high. The submarine was badly damaged, and the crew was exhausted. As they sailed back to port, Captain Anderson looked at his crew with pride. They had faced incredible danger, but they had stayed strong. The Silent Tiger had lived up to its name, a silent hunter in the depths of the sea. The end. This is the conclusion of the Silent Tiger's thrilling journey. The bravery and teamwork of the crew remind us that even in the darkest moments, courage and determination can lead to victory.